Welcome to another Monday / what are we? Sunday? If you're on that side of the world or this side of the world, you know what I mean. Guys, get into those comments and let us know if you are indeed coming into this one live. We're going to be starting this episode in just over 2 minutes, and it's going to be a big episode. So, welcome to another Monday. Coming to you live from the beautiful Hawaii. I hope you guys have had a stunning weekend. Got some sun of some sorts. Did some relaxing, no doubt. This is what it's all about. These weekends, you can't pour from an empty cup. It's one of my favorite sayings. And you've got to be able to do the recharge. If you're going to be putting it in midweek, you've got to still be able to do the recharge. So look at this. The people are piling in. We're going to start this episode in a minute and a half. So, team, good morning. Xanth, how are you, my friend? Lovely to look at you racing Nick in here of a morning. I love it. Kenny Beats is in here. Good morning, Kenny, or rather evening for you, mate. I hope you've had a great weekend. Hello, Nicky boy. What's happening, mate? I hope you were well, champion. Bobby Gordon, what is going on, mate? Lovely to have your company becoming really consistent again, Bobby. I hope the knee's feeling a little bit okay. We're starting in 1 minute, guys. Now, if you're joining this one live, there's already 12 people in watching this one live. Make sure you say hi in the comments, guys. It's always good for me to know who I'm actually speaking to when we do these podcasts. So, who else we got? Ash, good morning. I hope you've had a beautiful weekend, hun. Likewise for you, Claire. Lovely to have your company here this morning. We are on in just over 30 seconds. Now, this is going to be a, hello Hayes, how are you, mate? This is going to be a big episode. So get ready, get set, and I really do think that if you're able to approach this one with an open mind, it is going to be very beneficial. I'm going to share with you one of my frameworks that I work by, and I do think it's going to help. So we're going to bring in our audience over on TikTok and Instagram. Good morning, Kiara. How are you, mate? I hope you're good. All right, guys. So we are getting started in this episode. What I would ask is that if you do end up watching this one on replay, make sure you hashtag replay so that we know you've been in here. And I think this is the type of episode where I would love you to comment along. Even if you don't necessarily agree with the idea, okay, I would love to get your feedback. I think what we really need to do is we might need a while for this one to digest because it is a big episode. So rather than talk about it, I think we should just get started. What do you reckon? Let's go. On the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Better Body Academy podcast. This is the podcast that you guys come to when you are sick of the dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs. Happy Monday to the Aussies and everyone on that side of the world, and to everyone that's on the northern hemisphere. I don't even know how it works. But anyway, this side of the world, behind the date line, happy Sunday. Thanks for joining me. Okay, guys, we've got a big podcast episode here. The title of this episode is How to Unfuck Yourself. Okay? So it's going to be a big episode because it's going to be all around mental health and what keeps people stuck, okay? It's important for me to note that the contents of this episode are an opinion that I have formed, okay? Through working through my own struggles, my own problems, and listening to tons of other strategies and opinions from others on the matter. I am in no way, I need to make this very clear at the start, I am in no way minimizing the significance of poor mental health. Here, I am talking about what to do if you are struggling. Okay, I'm not minimizing the thing, I'm talking about what to do. If you have listened to any one of the previous 191 podcast episodes, you will know that it is the primary focus of this podcast. We talk constantly about transforming the body by transforming the mind. Now, this episode is likely to trigger a good few people. I want it to be known clearly that my intention is not to anger you, rather to provide you with maybe another perspective that you may like to consider especially if you've run out of options when you're trying to improve your own mental health, and just on a smaller scale, get unstuck. And all aspects of your mental health, like depression, anxiety, etc. Now, I was motivated to do this podcast because of a podcast that I listened to yesterday from one of my mentors, Alex Hormozi. This guy I think is incredible. And now, having worked with hundreds of clients in physical transformations myself, I've had these opinions on what keeps people stuck. And in my mind, I often have these like loose frameworks that I haven't perfectly yet articulated to be able to teach them. And listening to this podcast by Hormozi, it felt like he unpicked what was already in my mind and gave me the ideas on how to explain them. So I'm going to share my opinions here, but I want to acknowledge the refinement of these ideas should be credited to Hormozi, and I think it's always important that you credit people. So in Better Body Academy, our primary goal is to help people change their body, but we realize that it's usually the mind that is the limiting factor. Like, give me a silent head nod or put your hand up if you agree with that totally. So people sign with us for two reasons. Number one, they don't know what to do to actually get the weight off and keep it off. That's the first reason. The second reason is they don't know how to implement. In other words, they just need some support and some accountability in making the change. Two very good reasons. I need to know what to do and I need to know how to actually do it. Over the years, I've seen many incredible transformations. And yet, there are still plenty of people who see no permanent change. Unfortunately, these are often the ones that don't listen to the podcast. So one thing that is constant in the latter group, the people that don't change, is they repeat this statement over and over and over again. I'm stuck. I'm just feeling stuck at the moment. I'm just feeling stuck. I'm just struggling at the moment. And they never really get over the first few hurdles. And as a coach, it's really hard to navigate this because although you can see from the outside the person's their own worst enemy, most times they're not ready to hear that, nor are they ready to do what needs to be done to move forward. So it's a really difficult thing for me to try to navigate. One of the reasons that for this is they've become attached to being a victim, okay? That it's kind of weird. It's like being trapped is a weird form of comfort. It's like better the devil you know, right? This is the reason why a couple of podcast episodes ago, we talked about how sometimes when someone gives you a compliment about your transformation, you feel undeserved because your body's moved, but your mindset hasn't. And that's a weird place to be in. There's a certain sense of comfort when you are attached to your pains. It's a really difficult thing to contend with. That fear of feeling like you won't know yourself without your insecurities is enough to keep people from escaping forever. Can you guys let me know if you resonate with any of that? I'll say it again. The fear of feeling like if you move forward, you won't know yourself without your insecurities. It's actually better the devil you know. It's actually, I know myself if I have my depression. I know myself if I have my anxiety. And so we often attach to that in a sense of strange comfort. I think part of the reason that we are so attached to our feelings and that we struggle to move forward is that we assign so much meaning to our feelings. Let's take a situation, okay? So someone decides to go to a therapist. Now, in most cases, the therapist is a smart person, but in many cases, they haven't got their own shit together. And I know this because I know quite a few therapists and psychologists, and I often wonder how beneficial it is that this person is counseling a client, but they're empathetic and they love talking to people. So they become a therapist. So the therapist wants to know all of the meanings they assign to all of their feelings, the client's feelings. But the problem is, the more that we continue to agitate on these feelings, the more meaning we assign to it. The more meaning we assign to it, like a fire, the more oxygen these feelings get. And they grow and they grow and they grow and they reinforce a person's identity, just like a fire. Nick says, it becomes a deep identity. This is exactly right, and this is coming from a guy who was there. There could be a huge amount of trauma in a person's past, granted, absolutely, that causes them to self-loathe, to hate, to harm, and develop all of the mental illnesses. But to continue to identify with a story is an incredible problem. Now, I was so glad in the podcast from Hormozy to hear that he hated the concept of Alcoholics Anonymous. I fucking hate this idea as well. I loathe the concept of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're an addict. Admit you're an addict. Reinforce you're an addict. Remember you're an addict. Every repetition of this message gives oxygen to the idea that you're an addict. If you've read Atomic Habits by James Clear, you'll know that the best way to form good habits are to create an identity that you want to be. Yep. And then reinforce that identity every day by doing the things that that type of person with that type of identity would want to do. So you want to be a healthy man or a healthy woman. With every decision, you look through the framework of going, okay, well, what would a healthy man or a healthy woman do in these circumstances? You want to be rich? Well, with every decision, ask yourself, what would a rich person do in these circumstances? If habits are the product of an identity or a self-image, and they also reinforce whatever self-image we've created, they strengthen it, then how the hell does sitting up in front of a room of strangers, like a naughty boy or girl, telling them you're an addict, help you break a stranglehold on an addiction? This is fucking ludicrous to me. If you want to break an addiction, you need to repeat into existence, not that you're an addict, but you're the exact opposite. I am a healthy, powerful individual that makes decisions that strengthen my health. Not reinforcing the idea. Some listeners might say, yeah, Jace, you got no fucking idea because you've never been addicted to drugs or alcohol. And they'd be right. I can't answer that firsthand. But I sure as hell know that if you want to stay stuck, the best way to stay stuck is to keep letting it occupy all of your consciousness so it occupies all of your thoughts. That's the best way to stay stuck. Have you ever lost, let me ask you some questions, guys. Have you ever lost weight because you repeated all day how fat you were? Have you ever made money by repeating all day how poor you are? Have you ever gotten smarter by repeating every day how dumb you are? How does repeating that I'm an addict help you not be an addict? And how does repeating that you are stuck, that you are struggling, help you to get unstuck? It doesn't. You become what you think about all of the time. And if you suffer anxiety, depression, nervousness, the way you shrink it is to take away its power and meaning to you. You shrink away anxiety and depression and nervousness by minimizing its importance, not thinking about it all the time and marinating it. I'm going to share a brief story with you for some vulnerability, I guess. During the ages of 33 to 36, I would say that I was pretty unhappy. And the reason that I was pretty unhappy was because I'd been in the same job with the same company for 7 years at that point in time. And I wanted to do something different on a bigger scale because I know I was capable of it. My relationship sucked. It was void of any intimacy. Every day felt like the last. And so what I did was used alcohol and porn to escape it. Because I had a home loan, I was attached to my job, and therefore I felt that there was no way to escape it because the mortgage deductions just kept coming. So I started reading books of two kinds. One, making money, and two, being happier through positive psychology. I think I read probably 25 to 30 books on the topic of making money and positive psychology, how to be happier. But with all that work, trying to rake through to find these golden nuggets that I thought that I'd find. After 3 years, I was no wealthier. In fact, I had less wealth, and I was not happier. I was basically about the same. How is that possible? Because the more time you spend thinking about doing a thing without actually doing it, the more you strengthen your awareness that you lack the thing. There is a big penny drop moment here from many of us. I'm going to say this again. The more time you spend thinking about a thing without doing anything, the more you strengthen your awareness that you lack the thing. The more you read about money and happiness, which is what I was doing, without actually doing anything about it, the more you realize how much you're unhappy and you don't have money because you're thinking about it all the time. So I want to ask you a question. How many hours over the last year or two maybe have you spent thinking about why you are like you are and assigning like meanings to all of it, dwelling in the past? I'm probably this way. I'm a failure because of this and all this that happened. How much time each week do you think about or waste being stuck, being overweight? And by doing so, become more overweight because you realize how overweight you are. So you feel more depressed about it, so you go deeper down the hole. So the question is, do you want to continue to waste time and mental energy thinking about losing weight or being free of anxiety, but still being overweight and anxious? Or would you prefer to just not waste all the time and the mental energy, but just be overweight and anxious? So you've got two options. One, you can try to force your way thinking about it all the time, reminding yourself how overweight you are and I need to do something about it, get out of this cycle. Or you could just not worry about it, not go so deep into the thought, not assign all the meaning to it. The outcomes are the same, but one costs less. The breakthrough moment for me, was when I started assigning less importance to money and happiness. When I started assigning less importance to money and happiness. When I stopped making money and happiness the pinnacle of existence. I stopped reading about it. I stopped assigning meaning like I'm not happy, I feel sad, which means I'm wasting my life, which means I'm not achieving, which means I'm a failure. These are the meanings that I was assigning to my lack of happiness. Instead, I started saying, fuck happiness, fuck money. I don't care about the opinions of others. I'm just going to go and follow a process. And it was when I started taking horrible, uncomfortable, messy action without assigning any meaning to the failure that I started progressing. I was still at my job, but I hated my situation so fucking much that I paid a coach $10,000 to help me. I needed to create some leverage, or I'd continue to stay stuck reading books, trying to think my way out of my shithole. And when you try to think your way out without taking action, you deepen your lack. I stopped assigning meaning to my lack of happiness and instead just started moving forward anyway. And it's crazy similar how much I see this repeating for people inside of our academy. It's unbelievable how often it happens. I'm going to give you an example of one of our boys, Jason Nyers. I've never talked about him on the podcast. He's a 40-year-old guy that's 5'9" and was 120 kilos. He'd never been to a gym in his life. 40 years old, 120 kilos at 5'9". For reference, I'm 84. So he was 35 kilos more at basically the same height as me. He said to me, if I don't start soon, I won't start. I'm over feeling fat and shit. He was assigning a whole lot of meaning to being overweight. I'm a failure. I'm useless. I'm lovable. And all of a sudden, he was digging himself deeper. He started with us, just 8 weeks in, he's 11 kilos down. And at the moment, to all the boys that are watching, I would love for you to tag Jason Nyers in this process because he needs to hear about how fucking consistent and inspirational he's been. This is a guy that procrastinated for years, all while putting on more weight because he just kept thinking about how much he lacked it. You can't think your way out of a problem. And there was another level to this. I started to care less about how I felt. And this is a really important part of this episode. Guys, I've got a motto. If you would like to get on board with this concept, get the comments firing. Fuck my feelings. Fuck my feelings. In the modern world, we're pitched this idea of we can do anything we want to do and we don't have to do anything we don't feel like. So what happens as a consequence of that is that people only do what they feel like. The problem is what you feel like doing is usually the opposite of what is needed to get you uncomfortable to move forward. For example, when you are overweight and stuck, what do you feel like? You feel like emotionally eating because of the situation. You feel like sitting down because you have no energy. You feel like perhaps drinking so you can numb how you feel. When you only act according to how you feel, you get more of the same. Life starts with the exact opposite. When you change and you start to do things according to what you don't feel like. Why? Because like building a muscle, when you grow up, you subject yourself, when you grow, you subject yourself to things that are outside of your comfort zone. This is called adaptation. On a grand scale, over millennia, this is how the planet has grown. Evolution is a series of adaptations. That's all it is. If you don't adapt, you evolve, you stay the same. If you give less significance to your feelings, you reduce their power and you can act anyway. You adapt and you evolve. And so when it comes to these vicious cycles that we find ourselves in, it's the fear of the thing that reinforces its strength over you. In his podcast, Hormozi talked about having a panic attack. Oh God, I'm afraid that I'm going to have a panic attack tonight. Oh, I don't want to have a panic attack. Now I'm thinking about having a panic attack. And of course you have a panic attack. But it's also true of any vicious cycle that we want to break. Oh God, I started this program and I'm worried about failing and I feel like I'd fail at it. And I always fail at things and I may see myself failing. Oh, I'm stuck, I'm off the horse again. This is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. You are literally talking yourself into making the thing happen. I don't want to get stuck. I feel like I'm stuck. Oh man, I'm really getting stuck. Oh shit, I'm stuck. The natural consequence of each of these vicious cycles is a feeling of guilt and shame. Shame for failing, shame for falling off, shame for putting the weight on. It's the shame that gives all of these cycles power over you. So how do you get over these things? As we bring this podcast to a close, the simple answer is stop giving so much power to them. When I was stuck, I used to tell people how stuck I was. I tell people how I felt and how I wanted to move forward, how I wanted to do something amazing, but I couldn't because I had a home loan and a broken girlfriend. I assigned meaning to that. I need to be smart and responsible and keep paying my home loan. So I stayed stuck. Now in hindsight, I see the craziness of it all. Frequently, I see people in Better Body Academy saying, oh, I've just been stuck. I can't get motivated, etc., etc. But when you do that, you think you're taking responsibility for it, but actually all you're doing is putting your feelings on a pedestal and just giving your feelings too much importance in your life. You're assigning a meaning to the feelings when you'd be far better to actually just say, you know what, fuck it, and go to the gym without thinking about it. Because then you'd be straight back in momentum. Doing something takes the oxygen away from the feelings and shrinks the fire. If you have anxiety attacks, the way to reduce its power over you is not to identify them like the guy at the fucking AA meeting that sits up in front of everyone and says, oh, I'm an anxiety sufferer. This is pushing the anxiety in harder because you're identifying with it. It becomes your self-image. You've got to reduce the importance of this in your life. Coach Carly, for those of you that are in the female group, was the most anxious person I have ever met. And I've seen it firsthand because she was my sister. She wouldn't consciously realize it until this podcast. But the way she made her way out of the anxiety is to say, literally, fuck anxiety. I'm going to do the thing anyway. I'm going to pull up my phone and do a live video and crumble on live and be so not worried about it that all of the power is reduced. By fucking your feelings, you diminish the power and remove the meaning of all of the things that keep you stuck. The hardest part about depression is that it's a very serious thing, and we're very cautious in our conversations because of the potential outcome of self-harm. And I know so many of us have been impacted by this firsthand. But in being extremely careful in these discussions, we also put depression on a pedestal. We make it extremely important. We label sufferers as depressives, and then they go from being a completely normal person suffering depression, to a depressed person. They are now the thing. At the start, they're a person suffering depression. The depression is external to them. Do you see the difference? The depression is external to them. But the moment that they become a depressed person, they have internalized that, and then all of their thinking reinforces, I'm a depressed person, and trying to break from that depression is so fucking hard. I think we'd be much better to try and dissociate from the thing, take the medication, and enjoy the things that we know, or encourage the things that we know help, such as moving our body, feeding it more nutritionally, hanging around with people that aren't energy vampires. The people I see moving forward are the ones that manage to separate themselves as a person from the things that they are suffering from and diminish the significance of that altogether. Here's an example. Let's say I'm someone who suffers from anxiety and the thought of anxiety comes up. The way out of that is not to say, oh, I don't want to think about anxiety, because what we're actually doing there is effectively running away in fear. Instead, we diminish the anxiety, we have an anxious thought, and we say, fuck off anxiety. Because by doing that, fuck anxiety, it is irrelevant. We take away all of its power. There's no opposite of that. Rather than letting all of your problems occupy all of your attention and being scared of succumbing to them, shrink their importance and the relevance in your life. Turn your attention to doing. We're finishing up this episode. You become the story. Rather than endorsing the story, and to all of you that have at a certain point in time said, I'm stuck, I'm this, I'm that, you're personalizing the story. Rather than endorsing the story and getting caught in your head, just remove the power of the story. And when you do this over and over again, your attitude of neglect for caring about how you feel reduces its significance. Apply this to everything. This is what I do. Apply this to everything. You don't feel motivated? Great, go to the gym. You don't feel like checking in? Cool, do it anyway. You don't feel like cooking? Fucking cook. You don't feel like posting into the group? Post, be accountable. You don't feel like adopting this philosophy because some part of you thinks you're a fuckwit that doesn't understand what you're talking about? Awesome, try it for a little bit anyway and see what happens. Fuck your feelings, stop thinking about it. You need to act to start feeling good. You don't need to wait until things are perfect for you to be able to move forward. If you get into this condition of being able to act despite how you feel, that is the moment that you start changing the story. For those of you on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, I'm sticking around if you want to have a discussion after this podcast. This has been the Better Body Academy podcast, the podcast that you come to when you're sick of the dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for coming in and watching. Bye, Insta. Hey guys, how is it? Are 20 people still watching live? I'm gonna really be honest with you guys. I was shaking a little bit before doing that podcast. I was shaking because in as much as I want to tell the truth, like I want to tell my truth and share my opinion, at the same account, I'm really worried about maybe that's a weakness in me. I don't know. It's a validation thing, but I'm not trying to offend people, but Cole said it here. I don't like labels. I was shaking Denise because to a person that is deeply depressed, that is deeply stuck, that has been this way for 5 to 10 years, I understand how fragile in fact, no, I don't. I don't understand how fragile. What I do is I acknowledge that is a tough place to be in, and it can be very triggering. But the problem is that, like, have you I saw you shaking. It tells me you want the best for us. Rob, that's exactly right, mate. I just look at, I feel so grateful, and to be able to have a platform to be able to speak on this. As Carly said, the truth can be triggering. The truth is triggering, because if the truth wasn't triggering, we'd be doing it and we'd be not feeling the way we feel, right? We run a health and fitness program, a weight loss program. But this is why we had to create our mastermind program, because of the fact that we recognized that working in a small group with vulnerabilities, and in the mastermind program, we talk about these traumas. It's not that we ignore them. If we were raped as a kid or experienced a high crime or something like crazy traumatic, or we lost our parents very young, or any of these things, it's so delicate. And the trauma is real. I'm not saying ignore the trauma. Definitely not. You've got to reconcile that trauma. But what do you do then? Like, then what? That's my question. Then what? Are we going to just like stay attached to the trauma? This is the reason why I'm not going to go into the details, that I think M. Kelly is so brave, because what happened to her, she talks about it and she's like, but when we put a label on it, you're a rape victim, or you're an overweight person, or you're a depressive. Again, it's very hard to talk about, but it is like putting a label on someone puts them in a box. Putting a label on someone basically says there's something wrong with you. There's not fucking something wrong with you. There's not. There's not something wrong with you. You're having an experience. Absolutely. There's no denying that. You're having an experience. But there's not something fundamentally wrong with you. The problem is the moment we put a label on you and we say, you're depressed, you're anxious, you're this, you've got ADD. Like, yes. Then you almost go, then what do? You identify with that. The first thing you do, if you get that label on you, is you say, okay, so what is a person with depression, how do they get treated? As opposed to, like, that's a great example. You're clinically depressed. Okay. Then what? I think that, of course, that medication has a role. Absolutely. I'm not saying that at all. But is the way out of that not to think, okay, all right, so I've got this experience of depression. How do I dissociate from the depression so that I can start acting according to how a healthy person feels? So how far ever that is off in the future, that's my trajectory. But the converse is seemingly true. It's like, I'm depressed. Okay, there's the label. Now what? How does a depressed person get treated? Like a depressed person. Like this Alcoholics Anonymous thing, I understand that the theory here is that you need to remind yourself of the addiction so that you don't do it again. Surely the alternative of strengthening your ideals to a healthy person would constitute not taking alcohol. Like, it goes with the territory. But reminding yourself every day that you've got this ball and chain attached to you and there's nothing you can ever do with it. That's you for life. That's you for life. You've got this. How does that help you move forward? Nikki says, it's tough to confront these feelings, but done the right way, it's so rewarding. For me, improved physical health has given me the strength to address the mental health issues were the root of my decline in the first place. Frame that and fucking stick it on your wall. Because this is it, right? Nick wasn't in a place where he felt like doing the thing. I remember our first conversation, he didn't feel like doing the thing, but he recognized that now he has to do the thing, and then what will happen is downline, the significance of the mental side of things, the anxiety, etc., will start to reduce. It's not that it ever goes away necessarily, but you're not the thing. Nick is not the anxious guy anymore. Nick is not the guy with a history of trauma anymore. Nick experienced trauma. Nick experienced anxiety. Nick experienced depression. But he's not depression personified. He's not anxiety. He's not... You see the difference? And so, very difficult topic to address, guys. And coming back to the question, why was I nervous? I'm nervous because talking about these things, I'm not trying to in any way offend someone who is in that. And I said at the start, if you're in that state where you're feeling like that, then you don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that, you need to stop thinking and just move your way out of it. You don't want to hear that. And I totally I can understand why you would not want to hear that. That's part of the victim story is, I don't know if any of you guys have ever read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. This was the book that really kind of made me move forward. Reading this book, I realized that we live by an ego, okay? And we think of ego as like, I'm up myself. But the ego is essentially our sense of self, okay? It's our sense of self. And so what happens is we're so attached to who we want to be, who we think people want us to be, and we lose sense of ourself. We just don't know ourselves anymore. So it's very hard to operate from a set of core values if you don't know who you are anymore. Let's simplify all this, guys, because we can talk about it for days. Like, the takeaway message of this podcast or this episode needs to be, I get that you're not feeling great for the people that aren't. I get it because you've said it. The problem is, every time you say it, you're giving your feelings more importance than they deserve. When you think about that, when you pop a post up saying, I've been stuck, I've been in a hole, I've been this and that, like, think about what that does. Does that, it makes it look like you're being accountable, but does it diminish, does it make you feel better? No, it doesn't make you feel better. Essentially what it does is it puts an importance on this thing that took over you. Like, this thing grabbed you and shook you and you couldn't do anything because you're in the grip of this thing, even though this thing is in your head. And the problem is, when you were grabbed by that thing, you weren't able to move forward. So what we're better to do is not put any more importance on the thing. When someone asks you how you are, the best response that you can possibly give is like, I'm fucking awesome. I'm great. Because a lot of people will tell you how bad they are. Like, how does that dissociate you from how you're feeling? How are you, man? Not too bad. Like, what are we rating on a scale of fucking not too bad to horribly shit? Like, when did we start rating our life on a negative scale? Does this make sense, guys? We think it's about fat loss. It's not about fat loss, right? Fat loss is the mechanism for which transformation happens. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there, guys. If you think this was valuable and you feel that a message like this needs to be heard, please go to my profile, not my page, my profile, and share it if you feel it worthwhile. By the way, Rob, mate, I see you on YouTube. I see all the comments. I appreciate you, brother. Been lovely having your company here. Rob, if you just search Jay Stewart and we'll connect on Facebook, mate, okay? See you guys in the next episode. Love yous. Have a beautiful Monday.